the eminent correspondent of Ayanada Jonimal College, Triji Abhiruban, the chief mentor and principal of Ayanada Jonimal College, Dr. Shi Ashok, the Zenith convener of 6-day online research methodology course in social science, the AVSM course director of 6-day online a course, it's called research methodology in social sciences, the beloved organizing members, dear participants, good evening to one and all. Let me express my heartfelt thanks to the convener and course director for offering me an opportunity for being one of the resource persons of this 6-day online course. I would like to deliver the content under the title on data collection methods. Before knowing the contents about the data collection methods, first I'd like to focus the concept of data. Actually, the data, the word just derived from the Latin language. The data is the plural form of the data. What do you mean by data? Data are the raw facts which are used to create a meaningful information or facts. For example, students' mark sheet is a meaningful information report, whereas the raw facts are student's name, register number, name of the courses or subjects, the score which are scored by the students, etc. are called as the raw facts. These are all the raw facts are processed. Finally, we are getting the student's mark sheet, that is called the meaningful information reports. Let me going to explain the types of data. The task of the data collection begins after a research problem has been defined and the research design or plan checked out. While deciding about the method of data collection to be used for the study, the researcher should keep in mind two types of data. That is, one is called the primary data and another one is called the secondary data. Okay, let me go and explain the concept of primary data and secondary data one by one. The primary data are those which are collected afresh and for the first time, and thus happen to be original in character. The secondary data, on the other hand, are those which have already been collected by someone else and which have already been passed through the statistical process. The researcher would have to decide which sort of data he would be using for his study, and accordingly he will have to select one or other method of data collection. So method of data collecting the primary and secondary data differ, since the primary data are to be originally collected, while in case of secondary data, the nature of data collection work is merely that of compilation. So we describe the different methods of data collection with the pros and cons of each method one by one. See, the first method, that is called the primary data collection methods. See, under primary data collection method, there are different sub-methods. They are called as the observation method, interview method, through questionnaire method, through interview schedules, and case study methods. See, before knowing about the various methods of primary data collection, first I would like to point out that is called as the concept of primary data. Already I have pointed out the meaning of primary data, even though just I would like to briefly point out the primary data means a fresh data which are collected from the respondents or from the observation, that is called the primary data. We collect primary data during the course of doing experiments in an experimental research, but in case we do research of the descriptive type and perform surveys, whether sample surveys or census survey, then we can obtain the primary data either through observation or through direct communication with the respondents in one form or another, or through personal interviews. This, in other words, means that there are several methods of collecting the primary data, particularly in surveys and descriptive researches. The important ones are, one is called the observation method, second one is interview method, third one through questionnaires, and next fourth one that is through schedules, and last one that is called the other methods. I would like to briefly take up each method separately for your better understanding. The first primary data method that is called the observation method. Observation method is most commonly used method, especially in studies relating to behavioral sciences. In a way, we all observe the things around us, but this sort of observation is not scientific observation. The observation becomes a scientific tool and the method of data collection for the researcher, when it serves as a formulated research purpose, is systematically planned and recorded and is subjected to checks and controls and validity and reliability. Under the observation method, the information is sought by way of investigators' own direct observation without asking from the respondent. For instance, in a study relating to a consumer behavior, the investigator, instead of asking the brand of wristwatch used by the respondent, may himself look at the watch. The various advantages which are provided by the observation method. The main advantage of this method is that subject bias is eliminated. If the observation is done accurately, then the bias is eliminated. Secondly, the information obtained under this method relates to what is currently happening. It is not complicated by either the past behavior or future intentions or attitudes. Thirdly, this method is independent of respondents' willingness to respond, as such is relatively less demanding of active cooperation on the part of the respondents, as happens to be the case in the interview or the questionnaire method. This method is particularly suitable in studies which deal with subjects who are not capable of giving the verbal reports of their feelings for one reason or other. The disadvantages of the observation method. Observation method is providing various benefits or advantages. Just like a coin, each and every concept may have both merits and demerits, like head and tail. Like the observation method is also having some demerits or drawbacks. However, the observation method is providing advantages. Sometimes the observation method is also providing some limitations. The observation method has various limitations. Firstly, it is an expensive method because we need to spend more money for doing observation work. Secondly, the information provided by this method is very limited because we need to spend more time to collect the data. So it is not possible to spend more time, so that we are not able to collect more number of information from this method. Thirdly, sometimes unforeseen factors may interfere with the observational task. At times, the fact that some people are rarely accessible to direct observations creates obstacle for this method to collect the data effectively. There are different types of observation methods used here. They are called as the structured observation, unstructured observation, participant observation, non-participant observation, disguised observation, controlled and uncontrolled observations. Let me going to explain one by one. While using this method, the researcher should keep in mind things like what should be observed, how the observation should be regarded or how the accuracy of observation can be ensured. In case of observation is characterized by a careful definition of the units to be observed, the style of regarding the observation, the standardized conditions of observation, and selection of pertinent data observation, then the observation is called as a structured observation. But when the observation is to take place without these characteristics to be thought of in advance, the same is termed as unstructured observation. The structured observation is considered appropriate in descriptive studies, whereas an explorative study, the observational procedure is most likely to be relatively unstructured. We often talk about the participant and non-participant types of observation in the context of studies, particularly of social sciences. This distinction depends upon the observer's sharing or not sharing the life of group he is observing. If the observer observes by making himself more or less a member of the group, he is observing so that he can experience what the member of the group experience, and the observation is called as the participant observation. But when the observer observes as a detached emissary without any attempt on his part to experience through participation what others feel, the observation of this type is often termed as the non-observation method. When the observer is observing in such a manner that his presence may be unknown to the people he is observing, such an observation is described as disguised observation. There are several merits of the participant type of observation. One is called as the researcher is enabled to record natural behavior of the group. The second, the researcher can even gather information which not easily be obtained if he observes in a disinterested fashion. And third one is the researcher can even verify the truth of statements made by the informants in the context of a questionnaire or a schedule. But there are also certain demerits of this type of observation, like the observer may lose the objectivity to the extent he participates economically. The problem of observation control is not solved. So, and it may narrow down the researcher's range of experience. Sometimes we talk of that is controlled and uncontrolled observation. If the observation takes place in the natural setting, it may be termed as uncontrolled observation. But when the observation takes place according to definite pre-arranged plans involving experimental procedure, the same is then termed as controlled observation. In non-controlled observation, no attempt is made to use precision instruments. The major aim of this type of observation is to get a spontaneous picture of life and the persons. It has tendency to supply naturalness and completeness of behavior, allowing sufficient time for observing it. But in controlled observation, we use mechanical instruments as aids to accuracy and standardization. Such observation has a tendency to supply the formalized data upon which generalizations can be built with some degree of assurance. The main pitfall of non-controlled observation is that of subjective interpretation. There is also the danger of having a feeling that we know more about the observed phenomenon that we actually do. Generally, the control observation takes place in various experiments that are carried out in a laboratory or under controlled conditions, whereas uncontrolled observation is resorted to in case of exploratory researches. See, the next method that is called as the interview method. The interview method of collecting data involves the presentation of oral verbal stimuli and reply in terms of oral verbal responses. This method can be used through personal interview and, if possible, through telephone interviews. So, interview method, here there are two methods used. That is, one is called the personal interview method, another one is called the telephone interview methods. So, interview method is a method of collecting data, involves the presentation of oral, verbal and stimuli and reply in terms of oral verbal responses. So, there are two types of interview method. One is called the personal interview method, another one is called the telephone interview method. Let me going to explain the personal interview method. After that, I will give you a clear idea about the that is called the telephone interview method. See, this chart explains the types of interview methods. There are two interview methods. One is called personal interview, another one is called the telephone interview. Again, the personal interview divided into further subtypes. One is called as the structured interview, second one is called unstructured interview, third one is called the focused interview, and next one is called clinical interview, and last one that is called the non-directive interview. Okay, let me go and explain one by one. First, we know the meaning of the personal interview. After that, we will discuss about the sub methods of the personal interview. The personal interview method requires the person known as the interviewer asking questions generally in a face-to-face contact to the other person or persons. At the At times of interviewee may also ask certain questions and the interviewer responds to these, but usually the interviewer initiates the interview and collects the information. This sort of interview may be in the form of direct personal investigation, or it may be indirect oral investigation. In the case of In the case of direct personal investigation, the interviewer has to collect information personally from the sources concerned. He has to be on the spot and has to be meet people from whom the data have to be collected. This method is particularly suitable for intensive investigation. But in certain cases, it may not be possible or worthwhile to contact directly the persons concerned or account of the excessive scope of inquiry. The direct personal investigation technique may not be used. In such cases, the direct personal investigation technique may not be used. Again, an indirect oral examination can be conducted under which the interviewer has to cross-examine the other persons who are supposed to have knowledge about the problem under investigation and the information. The uptime is recorded. Most of the commissions and committees appointed by the government to carry on investigation make use of this method. Next are the sub-methods of the personal interview. The method of collecting information through personal interview is usually carried out in a structured way. As such, we call the interview as that is structured interview. Such interviews involve the use of set of predetermined questions and of highly standardized techniques of regarding this. Thus, the interviewer in a structured interview follows a rigid procedure laid down and asking questions in a form and order prescribed. As against this, the unstructured interview are characterized by a flexibility of approach to questioning. Unstructured interviews do not follow a system of predefined questions and standardized techniques of recording information. In a non-structured interviews, the interviewer is allowed much greater freedom to ask. In case of need supplementary questions, or at times he may omit certain questions if the situation so requires. He may often change the sequence of questions. He has relatively greater freedom while regarding the responses to include some aspects and exclude others. But this sort of flexibility results in lack of comparability of one interview with another, and the analysis of unstructured responses becomes much more difficult and time consuming than that of the structured responses obtained in case of structured interviews. Unstructured interviews also demand deep knowledge and greater skill on the part of the interviewer. Unstructured interview, however, happens to be the central technique of collecting information in case of exploratory or formulative research studies. But in case of descriptive studies, we quite often use the technique of structured interview because of its being more economical, providing a safe basis for generalization and requiring relatively lesser skill on the part of the interviewer. We may as well talk about that is focused interview, clinical interview, and non-directive interviews. First, I'm going to explain about the that is called focused interview. The focused interview is meant to focus attention on the given experience of the respondents and its effects. Under it, the interviewer has the freedom to decide the manner, the sequence in which the questions would be asked, and has also freedom to explore the reasons and motives. The main aim task of the interviewer in case of a focused interview is to confine the respondent to a discussion of issues which, with which he seeks convenience. Such interviews are used generally in the development of hypotheses and constitute a major type of unstructured interviews. The next one is called that is clinical interview. The clinical interview is concerned with broad underlying feelings and motivations or with the course of individual's life experience. The method of eliciting informations and it is generally left to the interviewer's direction. In the case of non-directive interview, the interviewer's function is simply to encourage the respondents to talk about the given topic with the bare minimum of direct question. The interviewer often acts as a catalyst to a comprehensive expression of the respondents' feelings and beliefs and of the frame of reference with which with such a feelings and beliefs take on personal significances. So these are all called as the subtypes of the personal interview. Okay, so let me going to explain the that is various advantages or benefits or various salient features of the personal interview. Despite the various variations in interview techniques, the major advantages and weaknesses of the personal interview can be enumerated in a general way. The chief merits of the interview method are as follows. The first one is that is called as the more information and that too in greater depth can be obtained. The interviewer, by his own skill, can overcome the resistance, if any, of the respondents. The interview method can be made to yield an almost perfect sample of the general population. The third benefit that is called as the there is a greater flexibility under this method as the opportunity to restructure the questions is always there, especially in case of unstructured interviews. And fourth merit is that is called the observation method can as well as the applied to regarding the verbal answers to various questions. The personal information can as well as be obtained easily under this method is the fifth advantage of the personal interview. Sample can be controlled more effectively as there arises no difficulty of the missing returns. Non-response generally remains very low under a personal interview method. And the seventh advantage of the personal interview method is that the interviewer can usually control which persons will answer the questions. This is not possible in mailed questionnaire approach. If so desired, the group discussions may also be held. The eighth advantage of the personal interview that is called the interviewer may catch the informant off guard and thus may secure the most spontaneous reactions than would be the case if the mailed questionnaire is used. The language of the interview can be adapted to the ability or educational level of the person interviewed and such. Misinterpretations concerning questions can be avoided under the personal interview method. The last benefit of the personal interview method, which is that is the interviewer can collect the supplementary information about the respondent's personal characteristics and environment, which is often of great value in interpreting the results. So these are all called as the various merits or strength of the personal interview, and like I'm going to explain the demerits or drawbacks of the personal interview. But there are also certain weaknesses of the interview method. Among the important weakness mentioned may be made of the following. It is very expensive method, especially when the large and widely spread geographical sample is taken. And next drawback of the personal interview is there remains the possibility of the bias of interviewer as well as that of the respondent. There also remains the headache of supervision and control of interviewers. The third drawback of the, as well as the last drawback are limitations of the personal interview, that is called as the certain types of respondents such as important officials or executives or people in high income groups may not be easily approachable under this method, and to that extent the data may provide inadequate. These are all major drawbacks. Along with this, some other drawbacks are also available. The next drawback that is called This personal interview method is relatively more time consuming, especially when the sample is large and the recalls upon the respondents are necessary. The next other drawback of the personal interview method that is called as the presence of the interviewer on the spot may overstimulate the respondents, sometimes even to the extent that he may give imaginary information just to make the interview interesting. The next limitation that is called as under the interview method, the organization required for selecting, training, and supervising the field staff is more complex with the formidable problems. Next limitation that is called the interviewing at times may also introduce systematic errors. The last and final drawback of the that is called the interview method that is called the effective interview presupposes a proper rapport with the respondents that would facilitate a free and frank responses. This is often very difficult requirement under the interview method, that particularly personal interview method. So these are all called as the various drawbacks or limitations of the interview method. Okay, then we're going to explain the that is prerequisites and basic tenets of interviewing. We need to remember some predetermined things while we are adapting the personal interview method. For successful implementation of the interview method, the interviewers should be carefully selected, trained, and briefed the persons. They should be honest, sincere, hardworking, and impartial, and must possess the technical competence and necessary practical experience of the interviewer. The interviewer needed to have that is trained knowledge. Okay, and he should be honest person, sincere in his work. He needs hardworking skill, etc. The occasional field checks should be made to ensure that interviewers are neither cheating nor deviating from the instructions given to them for performing their job efficiently. In addition to this, the other prerequisites, that is, some provision should also be made in advance so that the appropriate action may be taken if some of the selected respondents refuse to cooperate or not available when an interviewer calls upon them. In fact, the interviewing is an art of governed by certain scientific principles. Every effort should be made to create friendly atmosphere of trust and confidence so that the respondents may feel at case while talking to and discussing with the interviewer. The interviewer must ask questions properly and intelligently and must regard the responses accurately and completely. At the same time, the interviewer must answer the legitimate questions, if any, asked by the respondent, and must clear any doubt that the latter has. The interviewer is responsible to answer the questions, okay, which are raised by the respondents. Okay, the interviewer is responsible to clear the doubts which are raised by the interviewee or respondents. So the interviewer's approach must be friendly, courteous, conversational, and unbiased. The interviewer needs to talk in a polite manner with the respondents, and the interviewer needs to express the courteous character, and they should follow some interpersonal skill while making or doing the interview. The interviewer should not show surprise or disapproved of your respondent's answer, but he must keep the direction of the interview in his own hand, discouraging irrelevant conversation, and must make all the possible effort to keep the respondent on the track. So we need to ask questions which are related to our research purpose. We do not deviate from our track into unnecessary area. So these are all called as the prerequisites and basic tenets of a interviewing. Okay, so if you are having this all aspects in our mind, then we can collect the relevant and accurate informations from the respondents. Okay, the first primary data collection method, that is called as the personal interview method. In this personal interview method we discussed about the meaning of personal interview, and then various merits and demerits of personal interview. After that, we discussed about that is various sub methods of the personal interview, and the last one, that is called prerequisites of the personal interview method. And second method of primary data collection, that is called as the telephone interviews. This method of collecting information consists in contracting respondents on telephone itself. It is not a very widely used method, but plays an important part in industrial surveys, particularly in developed regions. Some of the people are very busy. We are not able to meet them directly. In such circumstances, we can get appointment even for making phone call. Okay, and we need to collect our responses from the respondents by making the telephone calls. That is called the telephone interviews. The telephone interviews is also providing various benefits or advantages. The chief merits of such a system are: the first one, that is called the telephone interview is more flexible in comparison to mailing method, because when the respondent is having a time, we are able to make a call and collect the responses from them. And the telephone interview method is faster than other methods. That is a quick way of obtaining information. Just we are making call and collecting the informations quickly, so that the respondent's time and the interviewer's times are saved. And we are also collecting the data very quickly from the respondents through telephone interview. It is cheaper than the personal interviewing method. Here, the cost per response is relatively low. Under personal interview method, the interviewer needs to meet the respondents directly. Each and every respondents. We need to meet each and every respondents directly. All the respondents may not be available in the same places. So which means we need to spend more money to meet the respondents by using traveling and other expenses. So the telephone interview method is cheaper than the personal interview method. And under telephone interview method, the recall is easy. Callbacks are simple and economical. Now we are having recording facilities in our mobile phone. Okay, so if you are making call through mobile phone, we are able to record the the responses which are given by the respondents, so that a recall is very easy under telephone interview method. There is a higher rate of response than what we have in mailing method. The non-response is generally very low. So under mailing method, just we are sending our questions to the respondents via mail, may or may not be reached to the respondents in the right time. So this is the problem of the mailing method. Whereas the telephone method, we are able to talk with them, and we are able to collect the informations very easily, so that the higher rate of response is received. And next, that is courtesy, that is replies can be recorded without causing embarrassment to respondents. Yes, it is also possible. Because of the development of information technology, we are able to record the informations without any embarrassment. The next benefit of the that is called as the telephone interview method, that is called as the interviewer can explain requirements more easily. At times, the access can be gained to the respondents who otherwise cannot be contacted for one reason or other. It is the next benefits of the telephone interview. The next advantage of the telephone interview, that is called the no field staff is required. Who is going to connect the research? Such a person may directly contact the respondents via phone call, and he or she is able to collect the responses from them. So here, no need to use any field staff or any other middleman. The last benefit of the telephone interview method, that is called as the representative and wider distribution of sample is possible, because we are saving the time. For each and every respondent, we are able to spend 3 to 5 minutes. So due to the time saving factor, we are able to cover more number of respondents, and also we are able to collect more responses from the respondents. So these are all called as the various benefits or merits or advantages of the telephone interview methods. Telephone interview method is also having some demerits or drawbacks. The telephone interview method, but the system of collecting information is not free from demerits. Some of these may be highlighted here. The first drawback of telephone interview method is little time is given to respondents for considered answers. The interview period is not likely to exceed 5 minutes in most cases, because the respondents don't like to talk more with the researcher, so that the researcher as well as the interviewer need to talk very precisely, because the time factor is very limited. So that a little time is given to the respondents for consider the answers. In such circumstances, we are not able to ask more number of questions, so that we are not able to collect more responses. The next drawback, that is called the surveys are restricted to the respondents who have telephone facilities. So we need to collect the responses from all the respondents, but all respondents may not have telephone facilities. It is one of the main drawbacks, so that the researcher is having a difficulty to collect the data from all the respondents. Next, the demerits of telephone interview method, that is called extensive geographical coverage, may get restricted by cost considerations. It is one of the drawback. See, another drawback of the telephone interview is called as it is not suitable for intensive surveys where comprehensive answers are required to various questions. Next drawback, that is called as the possibility of the bias of the interviewer is relatively more. Yes, here when collecting the data, we are not having face-to-face contact, so that we are not able to get exact informations, exact responses from the respondents. So the possibility of the bias of the interviewer is relatively more because he is not able to get all information from the respondents, so that the interviewer may create some exact state informations which are not provided by the interviewer sometimes. The last drawback of telephone interview method, that is called the questions have to be short and to the point. The proposed are difficult to handle. Which question you need to ask first, which question you need to ask second, it may be confused while conducting telephone interviews. So these are all called as the various demerits or drawbacks of the telephone interviews. What are they? The first one, that is called the little time is given to the respondents. Second one, surveys are restricted to the respondents who have telephone facilities. Extensive geographical coverage may get restricted by cost considerations. Next one, it is not suitable for intensive surveys where comprehensive answers are required. Here, the bias is more because interviewer may create some exhausted information which are not provided by the respondents. The last drawback, that is called the questions have to be short and to the point. The proposed are difficult to handle. So these are all called as the various drawbacks of the telephone interviews. So here we discussed about the primary data sources. Actually, the primary data sources normally divided into 5 types. One is called the observation method, interview method, questionnaire method, through schedules and case studies. So we discussed about the observation method, then various sub methods of observation. After that, we discussed about the interview method. Then interview method has the two sub methods, that is called the personal interview, telephone interview. Under personal interview, sub methods are structured interview, unstructured interview, focused interview, clinical interview, and non-direct interview. So we discussed about that is strength of personal interview and weakness of the personal interview, then prerequisites and basic tenets of the interview. And next, telephone interview method is another method of the that is primary data collection method. We discuss about the merits and demerits. After that, the third one is called as that is called the collection of data through questionnaire. Collection of data through questionnaire. The first one, that is called as the observation. Second one is called the interview, and third one is called as the collection of data through questionnaire. This method of data collection is quite popular, particularly in the case of big enquiries. It is being adapted by the private individuals, research workers, private and public organizations, and even by the governments. In this method, a pre-questionnaire is sent, usually by post, to the persons concerned with the request to answer the questions and return the questionnaire. A questionnaire consists of number of questions are typed in a definite order on a form or a set of forms. That is called the questionnaire. The questionnaire is mailed to the respondents who are expected to read and understand the questions and write down the reply in the space meant for the purpose in the questionnaire itself. So the respondents have to answer the questions on their own. So this is the meaning of the questionnaire. The questionnaire is, which consists of the number of questions printed or typed or sometimes by handwritten in a definite order. Which one need to ask first one, which one are to second one, like that. We need to follow some sequence. The question is mailed to the respondents, posted to the respondents who are expected to read and understand the questions and write down the reply in the space, which means it's sent to the literate people, because the literate people is able to fill the questionnaire. So the respondents have to answer the questions and their own. See, next are the merits of the questionnaire method. The questionnaire method is having various benefits. This, the method of collecting data by mailing the questionnaire to the respondents is most extensively employed in various economic and business surveys. The merits claimed on behalf of this method are as follows. First, the merits that is called the, there is low cost even when the universe is large and is widely spread geographically. So we are able to cover more number of respondents wherever they may be. So just we are sending the questionnaire by using the post. Through this, we are able to cover more geographical areas, because the respondents, more number of respondents are available in different geographical locations. And next one, that is next merit is it is free from the bias of the interviewer. Yes, actually the questionnaire is filled by the respondents. So here the involvement of the interviewer or the researcher is not possible. So that the biased responses, the receiving of biased responses is not possible under the questionnaire method. The third merits of the questionnaire method, that is called the respondents have adequate time to give their answers. Yes, it's sent to the respondents' place so that respondents may take their own time and fill the questionnaire. The filled questionnaires sent by him by taking his one time. Okay, so the respondents have adequate time to give their answers. Next advantages of the questionnaire method, that is called as that is respondents who are not easily approachable can also be reached conveniently, which means the respondents may be in remote area, but we need to collect information from them. For example, if I'm doing the research, I need to collect the data from entire India, which means the questionnaire method is a convenient method to collect the data from entire India about that is called as the buying behavior of the consumers, particularly the usage of the products of that is toothpaste. So the respondents who are not easily approachable can also be reached conveniently by using questionnaire method. The next advantage that is called the large sample can be made use of, and thus the results can be made more dependable and reliable. So we are able to collect the responses from the large number of respondents. Through this, we are able to get original responses from the respondents. So which are reliable in nature and which are dependable in nature. So these are all called as the various drawbacks, various merits or advantages of the questionnaire method. And the next thing that is called as the demerits of the questionnaire method or drawbacks of the questionnaire method. The main demerits of this system can also be listed here. The first drawback or demerits that is called low rate of return of the duly filled in questionnaires. Bias due to non-response is often intermediate. We sent, we sent, we are, we sent our questionnaires to the respondent's place. Sometimes it may not be reached to the respondents. Sometimes it is reached to the respondents, but they did not fill it and sent it properly. So there is also chance for getting bias. So bias due to non-response is often intermediate because some of the respondents having hesitations to send it. Some of the respondents may have laziness feelings so that they don't send it back for us. Sometimes they have boredom to send it. So that the low rate of return of the duly filled questionnaire is high in questionnaire method. Next drawback that is called as it can be used only when the respondents are educated and cooperating, which means it cannot be used for the respondents who are illiterate in nature. So, for example, if you are going to collect the data from the farmers in India, which means it's not possible because few of the farmers in India are educated and majority of the farmers are illiterate people. So if you want to collect the data from the illiterate people, which means the questionnaire method is useless one. And next drawback or demerits of the interview method that is called as that is control over the questionnaire may be lost once it is sent. There is no control. Okay, which means once you send the question to the respondents, which means we lost the questionnaire. Suppose if it is not returned back very safely. Okay, that is a drawback of the questionnaire method. And next drawback that is called the interviewer can explain the requirements more. Sorry. There is inbuilt inflexibility because of the difficulty of amending the approach once the questionnaires have been dispatched. So there is no flexibility. Once the interviewer or the researcher sent the questionnaire to the respondents, which means we are not able to get back again before filling it. So there is no flexibility under the questionnaire method. And next drawback, that is called, there is also a possibility of ambiguous replies or omissions of replies. See, respondents may not give their full concentrations or interest on filling the questionnaire. Simply escaping their, they are simply escaping from their responsibilities just by telling there is no time for me to fill the questionnaire. I'm not feeling well to fill your, so I'm not feeling well, so that I'm not able to fill your questionnaire. Okay, I mean I'm out of station, like that they are telling some excusable reasons, so that so that it is a difficult, it is a difficult for amending the, that is approach the once questionnaire have been dispatched, which means there is inbuilt, there is inflexibility, other things. There is also the possibility of ambiguous replies or omission of replies, because altogether to certain questions the interpretation of omission is, the interpretation of omission is difficult. We are not able to get some conclusions. We are not able to understand the responses which are given by the respondents. It is difficult one. Okay. And next drawback are demerits of the question method, that is called the, it is difficult to know whether willing respondents are truly representative. Because the respondents, whether they are having interest or not, we don't know exactly. Some respondents willingly fill the questionnaire and sent it properly for us. But some of the respondents don't like to send it properly, don't like to fill it properly. So it is difficult to know whether willing respondents are truly representative. The last drawback of the question method, that is called as the method is likely to be slowest of all we sent to them. We need to collect the question from each and every respondents. It may take more time because the respondents may be in different locations. Okay, all the respondents may not send their fill the questionnaire on time. So there is a difficulty. Before using this method, what we need to, it is always advisable to conduct a pilot study for the testing the questionnaires. In a big inquiry, the significance of pilot survey is felt very much. So in order to understand the difficulty while following questionnaire method, we need to adapt the pilot study. With help of the pilot study, we are able to understand the difficulties. Okay, and remove the difficulty by adapting a proper alternatives. Pilot survey is in fact the replica and rehearsal of the main survey. Pilot study is a rehearsal of the main survey. Such a survey being conducted by experts brings to the light the weakness, if any, of the questionnaire and also of the survey techniques. From the experience gained in this way, the improvement can be effected. So before finalizing our questionnaire, we need to conduct a pilot study with help of some experts. The people who are having more experience in the field of defining of a perfect questionnaire. Okay, so the experts may give positive and negative reply about the questionnaires. So if there is negative or deviation means we are able to identify it and rectify them by applying the proper methods or modifying the questionnaire. It is possible. Okay, so pilot study is very, very important to design a perfect questionnaire. Okay, see, even though we are having demerits, we need to use questionnaire method where the respondents are remote in area. Okay, and next are things that is called as the main aspects of a questionnaire. There are three aspects are very, very important while preparing a questionnaire. Let me go and explain one by one. The main aspects of a questionnaire, that is quite often, that is, questionnaire is considered as the heart of a survey operation. Hence, it should be very carefully constructed. It is not properly set up, then the survey is bound to fail. So this fact requires us to study the main aspects of a questionnaire, like the general form, the questionnaire sequence, and question formulation and wording. The researcher should note the following with regard to these three main aspects of a questionnaire. Among them, the first one that is called general form. So far as the general form of a questionnaire is concerned, it can either be structured or unstructured questionnaire. The structured questionnaire are those questionnaire in which there are definite, concrete, and predetermined questions are there. The questions are presented with exactly the same wording and in the same order to all the respondents. A resort is taken to this sort of standardization to ensure that all the respondents reply to the same set of questions. The form of the question may be either closed, that is, the type called yes or no, or open-ended, that is called the inviting free responses from the respondents, but should be stated in advance and not constructed during the question. So we need to decide what type of questions we are going to use, whether it's a open-ended or closed-ended. The structured questionnaires may also have fixed alternative questions in which the responses of the informants are limited to the stated alternatives. Thus, a highly structured questionnaire is one in which all questions and answers are specified and comments in the respondents' own words are held to the minimum. When these characteristics are not present in a questionnaire, yes, it can be termed as the unstructured or non-structured questionnaire. Here, the respondents are allowed to give their own answers, their own responses under unstructured or non-structured questionnaire. More specifically, we can say that in an unstructured questionnaire, the interviewer is provided with a general guide and the type of information to be obtained. But the exact question formulation is largely his own responsibility, and the replies are to be taken down in the respondent's own words to the extent possible. In some situations, tape recorders may be used to achieve this goal. The structured questionnaires are simple to administer and relatively inexpensive to analyze. The provision of alternative replies at times helps to understand the meaning of questions clearly. But such a questionnaires have limitations too. For instance, wide range of data and that too in respondents' own words cannot be obtained with structured questionnaires. They are usually considered inappropriately in investigations where the aim happens to be prepare for attitudes and reasons for certain actions or feelings. They are equally not suitable when a problem is being first explored and working hypothesis sought. In such situations, unstructured questionnaires may be used effectively. Then, on the basis of results obtained in pre-test, that is the testing before final use, that is called the pre-test. The operations from the use of unstructured questionnaire, one can construct a structured questionnaire for the use in the main study. So these are all concerned with the general form. And the next main aspects of a questionnaire, that is called the question sequence. In order to make the questionnaire effective and ensure quality to the replies received, a researcher should pay attention to the question sequence in preparing a questionnaire. A proper sequence of your questions reduces considerably the chances of individual questions being misunderstood. The question sequence must be clear and smoothly moving, meaning thereby that the relation of one question to another should be readily apparent to the respondent, with the questions that are easiest to the answer being put in the beginning. The first few questions are particularly important because they are likely to influence the attitude of the respondent and is seeking his desired cooperation. The opening questions should be such as to arouse human interest and others. The following type of questions should be generally be avoided as opening questions in a question. What are they? First one, that is called the questions that put too great strain on the memory or intellect of the respondents. So you don't use the, that is very lengthy questions. Okay, questions that put too great a strain on the memory or intellect of the respondents. Second one, questions of your personal character should be avoided. You don't ask any personal questions which are irrelevant for our studies. Last one, that is called questions related to personal wealth is restricted one. You don't ask any other questions which is related to the personal wealth of the respondents, which are not necessary for our studies. And other personal questions which are not related to study, we need to avoid them. You don't ask any other personal questions which are not relevant for our study. Okay. The following opening questions. The following opening questions, we should have the questions that are usually vital to research the problem, and a connecting thread should run through successive questions. Ideally, the question sequence should conform to the respondent's way of thinking. So we need to give importance for the question sequence. Knowing what information is desired, the researcher can rearrange the order of the questions. This is possible in case of unstructured questionnaire. To fill the discussion in each particular case. But in a structured questionnaire, the best that can be done is to determine the question sequence with the help of a pilot survey, which is likely to produce good rapport with the most respondents. Relatively difficult questions must be relocated towards the end, so that even if the respondents decides not to answer such questions, considerable information would have already been obtained. Thus, the question sequence should be usually go from the general to more specific, and the researcher must always remember that the answer to a given question is a function not only of the question itself, but of all previous questions as well. For instance, if one question deals with the price usually paid for the coffee, and the next with the reason for preferring a particular brand, the answer to this later questions may be couched largely in terms of price differences. So these are all aspects about the question sequence. Next one is courtesy, that is courtesy, question formulation and wording. Question formulation and wording. With regard to this aspect of the questionnaire, the researcher should note that each question must be very clear, for any sort of misunderstanding can do, that is, irreparable harm to a survey. Again, that is, the researcher should note that each question must be very clear, for any sort of misunderstanding can do irreparable harm to a survey. The question should also be important in order not to give a biased picture of the true state of affairs. Questions should be constructed with a view to their forming a logical part of well thought out tabulation plan. In general, all questions should meet the following standards. What are they? One is called the while formulating questions and wordings, we need to follow the following standards. First one, that is called the should be easily understood. It should be easily understood. That is, question should be easily understood by the respondents. Second one, the questioner, that is, question should be simple and easily understandable. Should be simple and precise one. That is, should convey only one thought at a time. Okay, they should not give any confusion for the respondents. And third one, the questions should be concrete and should conform as much as possible to the respondents' way of thinking. That is very, very important. For instance, instead of asking how many razor blades do you use annually, the more realistic questions would be to ask how many razor blades did you use last week. Instead of asking the question like how many razor blades do you use annually, that more realistic question would be to ask, that is, how many razor blades did you use last week. You have to ask question like this. Okay, so concerning the form of questions, the researcher use, that is, we can talk about two principal forms. Like while framing questions, we need to consider two principal forms. That is, whether we are going to use multiple choice questions or open-ended questions. In the former, the respondent select one of the alternative possible answers put to him, whereas in the later, he has to supply the answer on his own words. The question with only two possible answers, that is usually yes or no, which means it can be taken as a special case of the multiple choice question or can be named as closed question. There are some advantages and disadvantages of the that is each possible form of question. Multiple choice or closed questions have advantages of handling, simple to answer, quick and relatively inexpensive to analyze. These are all called the advantages of the multiple choice questions. So what are they? It is easily handling one, simple to answerable one, it is quick and relatively inexpensive to analyze it. They are most amenable to statistical analysis also. Sometimes the provision of alternative replies helps to make clear the meaning of the question. But the main drawback of fixed alternative questions is that of putting answers in people's mouth. That is, they may face a statement of opinion on an issue about which the respondent does not, in fact, have any opinion. That is, they have any opinion. In fact, they have more opinion. That is heavy. Okay, so not in fact have any opinion. There are, sorry, they are not appropriate when the issue under the consideration happen to be a complex one and also when the interest of the researcher is in the exploration of a process. In such a situation, open-ended questions which are designed to permit a free response from the respondent rather than one limited to a certain stated alternatives are considered appropriate. Such questions give the respondent considerable latitude in phrasing a reply. Getting the replies in the respondent's own words is thus the major advantage of open-ended questions. But one should not forget that from an analytical point of view, open-ended questions are more difficult to handle when compared with the closed-ended questions. The raising problems of interpretation, comparability, and interviewer bias is more under the open-ended questions. In practice, one rarely comes across a case when one questioner relies on one form of questions alone. The various forms complement each other. As such questions of different forms are included in one single question. For instance, multiple choice questions constitute the basis of the structured questionnaire, particularly in a main survey. But even there, various open-ended questions are generally inserted to provide a more complete picture of the respondent's feelings and attitudes. The researcher must pay proper attention to the wordings of your questions, since the reliable and meaningful returns depend on it to a large extent. So that researcher need to add some questions, that some open-ended questions. Researcher must add the open-ended questions. Since words are likely to affect responses, they should be properly chosen. Simple words which are familiar to all respondents should be employed. The words with ambiguous meanings must be avoided. Don't use the confusing words. Similarly, the tangent words, catchwords, or words with our emotional connotations should be avoided. Caution must also be exercised in the use of phrases which reflect upon the prestige of the respondent. The question wording in no case should bias the answer. In fact, question wording and formulation is an art and can only be learned by the practice. So the framing of questions is an art which is attractable for the respondents. Okay, sorry, attractable by the respondents. Okay, now next, the fourth method that is called as the collection of data through schedules. That is interview schedules. The fourth method that is called the collection of data through interview schedules. This method of data collection is very much like the collection of data through questioning, with a little difference which lies in the fact that schedules, that is proforma containing a set of questions, that is schedules are being filled by the enumerators who are specially appointed for the purpose. These enumerators, along with the schedules, go to respondents, put to them the questions from the proforma in the order the questions are listed and recorded the replies in the space meant for the same in the proforma. In certain situations, the schedules may be handed over to respondents and enumerators may help them in regarding their answers to various questions in the check schedules. Enumerators explain the aims and objects of the investigations and also remove the difficulties which any respondent may feel in understanding the implications of your particular questions or the definition or the concept of difficult terms. So this method requires the selection of your enumerators for filling up schedules or assisting the respondents to fill up the schedules. As such, enumerators should be very carefully selected. The enumerators should be trained to perform their job well, and the nature and scope of the investigation should be explained to them thoroughly so that they may well understand the implications of different questions put in the schedule. Enumerators should be intelligent and must possess the capacity of cross examinations in order to find out the truth, which are provided by the respondents. Above all, the enumerators should be honest, sincere, hardworking, and should have patience and perseverance. This method of data collection is very useful in extensive inquiries and lead to fairly reliable results. It is, however, very expensive and is usually adapted in investigations conducted by the government agencies or by some big organizations. The population census all over the world is collected through this method, that is interview schedule method. Okay, next. Next thing, that is differences between the questionnaire and schedules. Both questionnaire and schedules are popularly used methods of collecting data in research surveys. There is much resemblance in the nature of these two methods, and this fact has been made many people to remark that that from a practical point of view, the two methods can be taken to be the same. But from the technical point of view, there is a difference between the two. That is, there is a difference between question and schedule. The important points of differences are as under. The first one that is called the questionnaire is generally sent through mail to the informants to be answered as specified in a covering letter, but otherwise without further assistance from the sender. Whereas the schedule is generally filled out by the research worker or the enumerator who can interpret the questions when necessary. Next difference is to collect the data through questionnaire is relatively cheap and economical since we have to spend money only in preparing the questionnaire and in mailing the same to the respondents. Here, no field staff is required. Whereas to collect the data through schedule, whereas collect the data through the schedule is relatively more expensive since considerable amount of money has to be spent in appointing the enumerators and in importing training to them. That is, money is also spent in preparing the schedules. The next difference that is called the non-response is usually high in case of questionnaire, as many people do not respond and many people return the questionnaire without answering all the questions. Empty questionnaire may be sent by the respondents. Bias due to non-response often remains intermediate in the questionnaire. Whereas in the entry schedule, as against this, the non-response is greatly very low in case of schedules because these are filled by the enumerators who are able to get answers to all questions. But there remains the danger of interviewer bias and cheating. The next difference that is called as the in case of questionnaire, it is not always clear as to who replies, but in case of schedule, the identity of the respondent is known. Next difference is the questionnaire method is likely to be very slow since many respondents do not return the questionnaire in time despite several reminders. But in case of schedules, the information is collected well in time as they are filled by the enumerators. The next difference is the personal contact is generally not possible in case of questionnaire method, as the questionnaire are sent to the respondents by post who also in return the same by post. But in case of schedules, the direct personal contact is established with the respondents. The next difference is the questionnaire method can be used only when the respondents are literate and cooperative in nature. But in the case of schedules, the information can be gathered even when the respondents happen to be illiterate. The next difference is wider and more representative distribution of sample is possible under questionnaire method. But in the respect of schedules, there usually remains the difficulty in sending enumerators over a relatively wider area. The next difference that is called the risk of collecting incomplete and wrong information is relatively more under the questionnaire method, particularly when the people are unable to understand the questions properly. But in case of schedules, the information collected is generally complete and accurate as enumerators can remove the difficulties, if any, faced by the respondents in correctly understanding the questions. As a result, the information collected through the schedule is relatively more accurate than that obtained through questionnaire. The next difference is the success of a questionnaire method lies more on the quality of the questionnaire itself, whereas, but in the case of entry schedule, much depends upon the honesty and competency of the enumerators. The next difference is, in order to attract the attention of the respondents, the physical appearance of the questionnaire must be quite attractive. But this may not be so in case of schedule, as they are to be filled in by the enumerators and not by the respondents. The last difference is that is called the, along with these schedules, the observation method can also be used, but such a thing is not possible while collecting data through questionnaires. So these are all called as the various differences between question and schedule. So next thing that is called the collection of secondary data. So these are all other methods of primary data collections are also available. Okay, so previous things we discussed about the, that is various methods of primary data. Okay, now we are going to see about the, that is called as the uh, secondary data, that is collection of secondary data. Okay, the secondary data, which means the data that are already available, that is they refer to the data which have already been collected and analyzed by someone else. When the researcher utilizes the secondary data, then he has to look into various sources from where he can obtain them. In this case, he is certainly not confronted with the problems that are usually associated with the collection of original data. So these are called as the meaning of the secondary data. So here we need to discuss about the, that is published data and unpublished data under secondary data sources. There are two secondary data sources available. One is called the published data, another one is called the unpublished data. The published data, the secondary data may either be published data or unpublished. Usually the published data are available in, there is various publication of central, state or local governments. The next one, various publication of foreign governments or of international bodies and their subsidiary organizations. Third one, technical and trade journals. Next one, the books, magazines and newspapers. Next one, reports, publications of various associations connected with the business and industry, banks, stock exchanges, etc. Then sources from reports prepared by research scholars, universities, economics, etc. In different fields, others. And last one, public records, statistics, historical documents, and other sources of published information. These are all part of the published data. Then unpublished data. The sources of unpublished data are many. They may be found in diaries, letters, unpublished biographies, autobiographies, and also may be available with the scholars and research workers, and further trade associations, labor bureau, and other public or private individuals and organizations. So the researcher must be very careful in using the secondary data. He must make a minute scrutiny because it's just possible that the secondary data may be unsuitable or may be inadequate in the context of the problem which the researcher wants to study. Okay, so the characteristics of the secondary data. The following are the various characteristics of the secondary data. What are they? There is adequacy of data, reliability of data, and suitability of data. The first one that is called the adequacy of the data. That is adequacy of data, and second reliability of data, and third is suitability of data. Okay, first one I'm going to explain about the adequacy of data. If the level of accuracy achieved in a data is found inadequate for the purpose of the present inquiry, they will be considered as inadequate and they should not be used by the researcher. So the data will also be concerned inadequate if they are related to an area which may be either narrow or wider than the area of the present inquiry, which means which need to collect adequate informations. They are very, very important for us. Next is reliability of the data. The reliability can be tested by finding out such a things about said data. How we need to test the reliability, which means we need to test them by asking the questions. That is, who collected the data, what were the sources of data, were they collected by using proper methods, at what time were they collected, and last one that is called the was there any bias of the compiler. So you have to ask questions and collect the answer for this question. Based on the question, we are able to understand the reliability of the data. And last one that is called suitability of the data. The data that are suitable for one inquiry may not necessarily be found suitable in another inquiry. Hence, if the available data are found to be unsuitable, they should not be used by the researcher. In this context, the researcher must very carefully suitable the definition of various terms and units of collection used at the time of collecting the data from the primary source originally. Similarly, the object, scope, and nature of the original inquiry must also be studied. So from all this, we can say that it is very risky to use the already available data. So already available data should be used by the researcher only when he finds them reliable, suitable, and adequate. But he should not blindly discard the use of the data if they are readily available from the that is authentic sources and also be suitable and adequate for the for in that case it will not be economical to spend economical to spend the time and energy in the field of surveys for collecting the information. If you are doing this means if you are using the second data originally means then it may causes for plagiarism issues. Okay, okay. The next last method that is called the case study method. That is the next is secondary sources method that is called the case study method. What do you mean by case study? The case study method is a very popular form of qualitative analysis and involves the careful and complete observation of your social unit. Okay. Be that unit, yeah, a person, a family, a institution, or a cultural group, or even the entire community. It is method of study in depth rather than breadth. So the case study places more emphasis on the full analysis of a limited number of events or conditional and their interrelations. So the case study deals with the processes that take place and their interrelationship. Thus, the case study is essentially an intensive investigation of a particular unit under the consideration. So the object of case study method is to locate the factors that account for the behavior patterns of the given unit as an integrated totality. Okay. So next are characteristics of a case study. Okay, the important characteristics of a case study method are as under. The first one that is called the under this method, the researcher can take one single social unit or most of such units for this study purpose. He may even take a situation to study the same comprehensively. The next characteristic is that is here the selected unit is studied intensively. So it is studied in a minute details. So generally, the study extends over a long period of time to ascertain the natural history of the unit so as to obtain enough information for drawing a correct inferences. The next characteristic that is called the, in the context of this method, we make complete study of the social unit covering all fact sets. Through this method, we try to understand the complex of factors that are operative within a social unit as an integrated totality. Next characteristics, under this method, the approach happens to be qualitative and not quantitative in nature. The next characteristic is, in respect of the case study method, an effort is made to know the mutual interrelationship of causal factors. Under case study method, the behavior pattern of the concerning unit is studied directly and not by the an indirect and abstract approach is the another characteristics of the case study method. Okay, last one, that is case study method results in fruitful hypothesis along with the data which may be helpful in testing them, and thus it enables a generalized knowledge to get richer and richer. In, it, in its absence, the generalized social science may get handicapped. Okay, so in order to make the case studies, we need to follow some assumptions. The case study method is based on several assumptions. The important assumptions may be listed as follows. The first assumption is that is called the assumption of the uniformity in basic human nature in spite of the fact that human behavior may vary according to the situations. The second one, the assumption of the studying the natural history of the unit is concerned. Third one, the assumption of the comprehensive study of the unit is concerned. These are all called as the various assumptions. Next, the major phases involved while making the case studies, they are, that is recognition and determination of the status of the phenomenon to be investigated, and the unit of attention is gathered. The first phases. The next one is called the collection of data, examination, and history of given phenomenon can be done. Okay, next the phases, that is called diagnosis and identification of causal factors as the basis of remedial or development treatment. The application of remedial measures, that is treatment and therapy, may be used. That is, this phase is often characterized as casework. Last one, that is called the follow-up program to determine the effectiveness of the treatment applied. So these are all called as the various phases involved in the case study method. So these are all called as the various methods of data collections. Okay, and last part, that is called the selection of appropriate method for data collection. So we need to remember this all the points, okay, while selecting a particular method for collecting the data. Okay. Thus, there are various methods of data collection. As such, the researcher must judicially select the method or methods for his own study, keeping in view the following factors. The first factor, that is called the nature, scope, and object of the inquiry. This constitutes the most important factor of affecting the choice of a particular method. The method selected should be such that it suits the type of inquiry that is to be conducted by the researcher. This factor is also important in deciding whether the data already available or there is secondary data are to be used, or the data not yet available, that is a primary data are to be collected, whether the secondary data or primary data, which type of data you need. So you have to decide it. And next factor, that's availability of funds. Availability of funds for the research project determine to a large extent the method to be used for the collection of data. When the funds at the disposal of the researcher are very limited, sorry, when the funds are disposal of the researcher are very limited, he will have to select that comparatively cheaper method which may not be as efficient and effective as some other costly method. The finance, in fact, is a big constraint in practice, and the researcher has to act as within these limitations. The next factor, that is called the time factor. The availability of time has also to be taken into the account in this, that is deciding on a particular method of data collection. Some methods take relatively more time, whereas with others the data can be collected in a comparatively shorter duration. The time at the disposal of the researcher thus affects the selection of the method by which data are to be collected. So these are all about the time factors. The last factor, that is called as the precision required. That is precision requirement. The precision required is yet another important factor to be considered at the time of selecting the method of collecting the data. Okay, but one must always remember that each method of data collection has its uses and is in superior in all situations. For instance, telephone interview method may be considered appropriate if respect of few items with or without certain degree of precision. In case the funds permit and more information is desired, the personal interview method may be said to be relatively better. In case the time is ample, the funds are limited, and much information is to be gathered with no precision. The mail questionnaire method can be regarded more reasonable. When funds are ample, the time is also ample, and much information with no precision is to be collected. Then either a personal interview or the mail questionnaire or the joint use of these two methods may be taken as an appropriate method of collecting the data. The conclusion is that where wide geographic area is to be covered, then the use of mail questionnaire supplemented by the personal interview will yield the more reliable results per rupee spent than the either method alone. Okay, the secondary data may be used in case the researcher finds them reliable, adequate, and appropriate for his research. So while studying motivating the influences in market, the researcher are studying people's attitudes in psychological social surveys. We can resort to use of one or more of the projective techniques stated earlier. Such techniques are of immense value in case of reason is obtainable from the respondents who knows the reasons but does not want to admit it, or the reason relates to some underlying psychological attitudes and the respondent is not aware of it. So these are all about the called as the various aspects regarding the data and the collection of data. That is methods of collecting the various data. With this, I would like to conclude my session. So thank you so much for the course convener, director, for offering an opportunity to deliver the contents regarding the data collection methods. Thank you so much for all the participants for your patience listen.